All right, Dr. Logan, let's talk a little bit about, or let's talk more about your experience as a transformational leader.
Yes, sir.
Let's think about when you came to Hillside in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
You were already a successful principal at New Tech
Mm-hmm.
High School, and you were taking over a school that was less than 70% graduation cohort rate. The state was threatening to take over because of historically low performing test data. Reputation in the community had dissolved in a lot of respects. And then they tap you.
The reality is, I was asked probably 3 times.
Oh, wow.
And those 3 times I said, no, I'm good.
Wow.
You know, and it was around December of 2011, you know, where I was asked again. And I thought about it. I said, you know, that time I thought, prayed, and it immediately came to me, and I was like, you know, that's not going to be fair to those kids.
Yeah.
For them to have to go and find somebody who's not familiar with the school, who's not familiar with the culture, the challenges. Like, yeah, and all I could think about were, you know, the students. Like, you know, what's good for them. And they weren't even my students then.
Mm-hmm.
And what was also tugging at me was like having to give up, you know, all that we had created.
What you had built, literally built
at Hillside New Tech. And that was a large part of the reason why I kept saying no, you know, because I didn't know how we were going to process that. And the conversation initially was, well, we'll merge the two, because they had done the same thing at Southern
mm-hmm,
School of Engineering, if I remember correctly.
Yep, where I taught.
Yeah, and so they were going to bring the two back together and leave it as an academy. So that didn't happen for whatever reasons, and you know, that was clearly above my pay grade. But again, like I said, it was largely about the kids. And when I got there, you know, I used to always say, like, boy, the worst thing that could ever happen to you is, or just to anybody, is to have to start school in the middle of the year. As a teacher, as a principal, rough. As anything. And lo and behold,
especially turnaround.
I started in February of 2012. But I tell folk all of the time, it's probably the best thing that happened in that regard, because it gave me an opportunity to see and just watch. Couldn't do too much.
At that point, nobody expecting you to do much.
Right. And the one thing I did change was, of course, the lunch dynamic. I think they had a smart lunch, and you know, there
lunch was crazy.
Fights every day.
Lunch was crazy.
Fights and
I never forget my first day at the school as an assistant principal, because I started the same year that you came.
Mm-hmm.
My first assistant principalship. And my wife came to the school. The first time she came to the school, she walked in, girl fight, middle of the lobby, the grand lobby. And she like, oh, I'll never come back to that school again. I'm telling you, and I'm talking to the camera now. When I say this man took over a situation that I don't wish on anybody. First week there, I told my wife, I won't make it to December. I've never seen nothing like this.
Yeah, that December marker is always because there was a point in my career as an AP at Hillside where I told somebody, I was like, yeah, I ain't coming back here after December. Once the principal who brought me there had left. But yeah, man, it was something to see. But what I saw was a lot of indifference.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of folk had not necessarily given up, but I think they just felt lost.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was about really trying to figure out who was here for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time that school year had officially ended, in the summer of 2012, I'm almost certain we probably had 42 positions posted on the district's website, from administration all the way down to our custodians. And I was like, yeah, y'all got to go.
Yeah.
Because I'll figure this out.
Yeah.
Like, we'll figure this out. And we had every position filled. And you were there with me.
Yeah.
Where we interviewed on Sundays, we interviewed at Starbucks, we interviewed at Barnes and Noble, at the school. We didn't have Zoom and Skype and that. I think we had Skype. For people who might have been out of state, but we were just aggressive.
It wasn't what it is now, though.
Right. No. And this is very concerning where we are now. But, you know, we definitely back then had more apples to choose from.
Absolutely.
And through that process, I think it certainly made all of the difference in terms of being able to get such a large chunk of the faculty who are now new to buy into what we were then doing in an effort to move the school forward. And, you know, even some of the changes we made in that spring, like we saw some significant gains instructionally.
Absolutely.
With some of the things that we put in place just that spring. And that was largely just, you know, supervision of instruction.
Yep.
But
and expectations.
Expectations. Like, you know, I'm there every day. I expect everybody to be there every day.
Yep.
You know, I'm pulling in the long hours. I expect folk to pull in the long hours if that's necessary.
If you got a duty post, make sure you're on your duty post.
Your duty post. Like, you know, this is, again, that goes back to the professionalism thing. Like, I'm not telling you something 4 and 5 times. Like, you're an adult. You know, the kids are counting on you to be in place. I'm counting on you to be in place in an effort to make sure that, you know, we operate effectively and efficiently, and making sure that safety is prioritized.
So many of our issues, fights, things like that, literally were people not being in place.
That's it. That's it, man.
People not being in place. And kids gonna find the blind spot.
That's it. They look for the blind spot.
They look for the blind spot.
And I tell my team, even until today, supervision, safety, and security is your number one responsibility. Your number one. Because in the absence of that, there is no curriculum and instruction. There can't be. It's kind of like classroom management. For administrators. You have to make sure that you have set up efficient, as best you can, and effective systems to make sure that we operate orderly and safely.
Along those same lines, you go from less than 70% graduation cohort rate to, by year 4, from 2012 to 2015, graduating class, over $12 million in scholarships, over 90% graduation cohort rate. And I think the best thing that I remember about that class was they got $12.5 million in scholarships. They were upset because their goal was $15 million.
Right, exactly.
How do you go from a school about to be shut down to that in literally 4 years, but if we think about it, it was less than 4 years, and sustain that growth and continue to grow?
Immediately what I saw once I understood, I understood the process being at New Tech, but of course at New Tech I only had like 400 students. And so the senior class was like 110 kids. But I understood how we were the first or the only school that year in the Triangle to have 100% graduation rate in 2011. I understood how the process worked. And when I came to Hillside, what I found out immediately is like most people didn't understand how the graduation cohort worked. So it was about firstly educating folk about why we do what we do and why so many things were important. And the reality of the thing was helping people to make connections between the work of the registrar, the data manager, the counselors, and making sure that you all have to stay on the same page.
Communication gotta be there.
Like if a student stops coming to school and a teacher knows that they went to another school, then we got to get with that other school to get documentation that that student actually, you know, went to that school or whatever the case may be. And so you had people just transferring, not requesting transcripts, not filling out
no documentation
forms, no documentation, nothing. And so,
and I think that happens more often than we think.
Exactly.
At schools, and we wonder what happened to the kids.
Exactly.
And why the numbers look like the numbers are. And we can control a lot of it.
And we can control a lot of it. And so you try to put in the best systems possible to manage that. And ultimately, because you can always take care of the kids who are in the building, right? You know who's in the building. It's the kids who have left the building that started the 9th grade with the kids who are in the senior class or whatever the case may be. And so, again, if we're managing the numbers inside the building and we're keeping a track of them, like that's also important, you know, because we had a lot of students who were still in the 10th grade that should have been seniors or in the 9th grade and should have been a senior, and they had the credits to be a junior, and nobody was counting the credits, nobody was promoting the students. So there was a whole lot of like stuff that just wasn't systematized.
Yeah.
And so putting in those processes and procedures is what elevated our work and accelerated our work when it was all said and done.
Again, routines, processes,
That's it. That's
inspection.
And everybody knows, people who know me knows I'm a big picture guy, and I have to surround myself with people who can attend to the details. And I've been fortunate in that regard because I've had so many administrators and folk on our instructional support team that can do that.
Yeah.
And so when they attend to those details, that's where those systems are strengthened, because we get an opportunity to reflect on those systems to see, where the gaps are. How do we fill those gaps? How do we make this better when it's all said and done? And because if you don't, you'll reach a plateau.
Yeah.
Or you'll go, start to regress.
Once you plateau, you start regressing.
Yeah. And so just those systems, man. But more importantly, or most importantly, creating a culture of a healthy culture. Let's just start there. A culture that puts the students first.
Yeah.
A culture that recognizes the faculty and staff and their talents and their contributions.
Talk about that. What are the steps to doing that? Because I think we talk a lot about culture and education, and you have to establish culture. And I tell people, once you get the culture right, that's going to net you 10 points.
Right.
Proficiency.
Exactly.
Quick.